Charley, thank you for being here. I had the privilege of watching your film last night, getting ready for today, and I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks for having me. And yeah, I appreciate it.
We're going to make a two-parter out of this because I want to talk to you individually first for this episode, just about your journey to filmmaking and dive a little deeper into some of the things that you talked about in the film. And then we'll have next episode following this one the following week. We'll have the cast, most of the cast from your film. So thanks again for your time. Let's get started.
Of course.
I'm a huge believer in storytelling and the power of storytelling. And I really like how you brought the people together within the film, which we'll get to the details of the film in a little bit. But in the very beginning, we find out about an accident that you had and just kind of the life you had before that accident and the sports that you were interested in and the hobbies that you'd taken up. So talk a little bit about your life before the accident so we can start to unfold what happened after.
Sure. I grew up with a really kind of athletic disposition. Athletics was kind of the first and foremost piece to the way I was raised. My dad was a diving coach, a gymnastics coach, a PE teacher. And my mom was a really good athlete as well, although she didn't continue anything athletic into her adult life. But it was one of those things that, like, feeling comfortable in our body and moving through the day in kind of a fun and adventurous way was sort of just a way of life. It wasn't really anything that we had to work very hard for, my brother and I. And so when I got the opportunity to do sports, it was just something that clicked in for me right away. But the team aspect was a struggle for me. And so I was really drawn to these independent sports, skateboarding and snowboarding. And my dad was also an artist. And so there was kind of like this artistic expression that was sort of instilled in us as well, to try to find new ways of looking at things or new ways of exploring things. And so skateboarding and snowboarding, really struck a chord with me. And going through school, that was all I cared about and all I thought about. And so I spent a lot of time doing it, and I excelled, at a pretty rapid rate in my younger years. I started when I was 10 and picked up a few sponsors by the time I was 13, 14, and I was traveling around and doing some contests. And I had dreams of being a professional, although at the time I wasn't quite there, but the trajectory was maybe there, that if I really applied myself, I could maybe make a career out of this and push myself to that level.
I really understand what you're talking about in terms of it has to be something that you love that is a way of life, I think, for you to become a professional at anything, really, whether it's athletics or writing or filmmaking. And my brother, he was a BMX bike rider and was getting sponsors and doing those things. And then my nephew is now a mountain biker, and I understand the sponsorship and I understand how that all works. You really have to stand out, and it has to be something that I know as a witness of my nephew, he can't not do it every day.
Yeah.
Like he can't, watching the film and seeing Sean have to come back in and get his skateboard because it was too far away from him. That kind of just needing to be near his bike or needing to be, climbing, whatever it is, and what you loved, it was just part of the fabric of who you were.
Yeah. Through working with Jen and Lori, there's kind of a psychological component to this film. Through learning about things like grit and things about, passion and determination, it became evident that the key ingredient to grit is passion. And it's one of those things that when people live and breathe something, nothing's going to get in their way or stop their, their progression or their push, except for maybe the thing that might stop them is fear. And I think that that's what happened, in my teen years, is I went through an accident that kind of had this hard brick wall of fear that I didn't have. I didn't have the right tools to work around that wall or to work through it. And because I didn't have any mentors or coaches or anything to help me, address this new fear that I had. And so,
Well, I think in what you do and in what all of the cast in the film does, needs a little bit of fear, right? You need to have a little bit of fear and a little bit of respect for what you're doing, the rock you're climbing or the hill you're racing down, whatever the case. But you're saying that when you had the accident, so tell us what happened during the accident, first of all.
sure. So yeah, when I was 17, I went to a big air contest up in Schweitzer, Idaho. And it was a night contest, which I wasn't super familiar with riding at night. It was a little bit of a new setting for me. And there was the stadium lights and, black sky, white snow. When you're doing aerials and things, like all that stuff kind of matters when you're, orienting your position in time and space. And so I think that was one of the factors that threw me off. But so I was in this contest. It was icy. It was dark, stadium lights. And I just went off the lip wrong. And it was a pretty routine trick, but, when the margin is pretty thin with some of those larger jumps and some of those harder tricks, that if one little thing is off, the whole thing, it just goes wrong. And essentially I lost, I lost awareness of where I was in the air, and I ended up falling on my head and my shoulder, and it knocked me out. I was knocked out for about an hour. I went into seizures, and I had some pretty severe back injury and head trauma. Went to the ER and ended up being transferred from the ER in Sandpoint, Idaho, to Sacred Heart Hospital in Spokane to be near a neurosurgeon. And I mean, to say the least, like it rocked my world. Like coming out of that and then seeing the video.
Yeah.
I almost wish I didn't see the video, because
Yeah.
I might have actually worked my way out of that like mental.
Okay. So you saw it back then.
Yeah.
We saw it in the film. And in the film, it looked pretty horrific, pretty terrifying for you and everyone around you.
Yeah. I mean, it was really scary to see my friends all huddled around me, watching me having a seizure and being unconscious.
I thought you were awake. I didn't know about the seizures. So that movement was you were unconscious, but you were having
that convulsion. Yeah, exactly. Which I ended up having another seizure, I think, later that night, which was more alarming. And I think that's why they sent me to Sacred Heart Hospital in Spokane. A seizure right after a head trauma is pretty common. I guess it's your body's way of kind of waking itself up and keeping things moving. But if you have yet another one, I guess that's a little more alarming.
And did you have any others after that?
No, luckily that was kind of the end of.
But they were probably waiting to see if you would.
Exactly. Yeah. And I spent about 13 months doing physical therapy and a lot of chiropractic work on my back, and I still have migraines to this day. Like it's still a topic in my life.
Right. Well, so was there a conscious decision made? I mean, obviously you're going through the period of time of rehabilitating your body and healing. Do you remember a conscious decision saying, I'm not doing it at that level anymore? Or, so was there a moment?
It was, my first thought was on the drive home from Spokane, because my friends passed the video camera along, I guess maybe to the ambulance driver. Somehow the camera ended up in my position in Spokane, and so I was able to watch it on the way home. And I remember that first thought thinking, like, I started kind of like drafting a message to my sponsors of like saying, I don't think this is the right fit. Like, I don't think I can do this anymore. Like, and I didn't commit to it right away, but it was within the next couple months that I stopped competing, and it was kind of a soft exit, if you will.
Right. There wasn't a big announcement. There wasn't social media for you to make a big announcement.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, this was 1999, I think it was. And
right.
I mean, I'd have to really go out of my way to let people know.
Right. Well, let's take a break. When we come back, I want to talk about how you then transitioned into filmmaking and storytelling. So we're back in just a moment. We're back talking with Charley Voorhis about his film project Pivot. We got to the part about your accident, which you do talk about in the film, and how that led to you really transitioning into film. And what was that transition like? I mean, obviously well, I can't say obviously. What about film attracted you going from what you were doing into filmmaking? And what was your first kind of, we talked about how you have to love it and have a passion for it. What was the first thing you did, and what brought that passion alive for you?
Yeah, I wish I could say that the passion was what kind of spurred my transition. But honestly, it was kind of the next best thing. In high school, as a junior and senior, I went to the tech center and I took a video production class. But honestly, I took that class specifically to make skate and snowboard videos.
Right.
I wanted that skill set basically to aid my my two sports that I loved. And so I got good at it only because it helped showcase those sports a little better. And then when I kind of hit that mental roadblock with doing those sports, that was the next thing that I was halfway competent at. In full disclosure, I wasn't a good student. I was maybe a C student, but sometimes even a little less than that. But I did excel in video. That was something that kind of came natural to me, but I worked really hard because, like I said, I wanted to make really good skate and snowboard films. And as a senior in high school, I was really kind of at this crossroads of what to do with myself. And I had this skill set, and my oldest brother, who was a longtime photographer, recommended that I apply to film school. And he kind of jokingly said, you should apply to Brooks Institute of Photography down in Ventura, California. So I applied, and I didn't have a high enough GPA, but based on my portfolio, they made an exception, and they let me go to film school.
It's obvious watching this film. It's beautifully done, and it's obvious that you know how to capture. Watching, for example, the skateboard part at the beginning with Sean, and him teaching Jess and Mitch how to do this craft. There were just parts of the boards we may never had seen if you hadn't known how the mechanics of the board even.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'll circle around to the reason I picked those three sports for this specific film. But spoiler alert, it's because I know those three sports pretty well,
right?
And I understand the nuance.
Fair enough, right?
I knew what to anticipate, where the struggle points would be, or the pressure points would be in terms of learning those three sports. But when I first went to I was going to say when I first went to film school, I was very fixated on music-based editing. So a lot of, kind of fun, trendy, editing techniques. And I wasn't focused on story at all. I actually didn't really know anything about storytelling. I wanted to edit either music videos or skate and snowboard films. And it wasn't until later when I started learning a little bit more about psychology and just reflecting on the life you've lived and what you've become. There's kind of this really organic pathway that our lives lead, and we tend to build on things that we've experienced and either struggled through or excelled at. And that became really fascinating to me, and so that kind of turned into the arc of a lot of my storytelling, of just the progression of point A to point B. And so
I think an important facet of storytelling too is, and what I got from your film is, I, like the guys, thought rock climbing looked pretty reasonable to achieve, and watching Jess do it and then watching them struggle, I felt like this is something I could do, or at least I could imagine doing it and insert myself into the film and see each of those three things, because they were so well articulated and shown that for the 100 minutes or so, I got to be a part of that storytelling. And because they were each trying out each other's sport, which is kind of the premise of the film, or is the premise of the film, I think that it made people like me who've never done either of those three things, either ever tried them or not done them well, to think, okay, so it is a hard thing, and it does take so much practice, so much commitment. But for the moment, we got to kind of feel like what it would be like, because they were vulnerable in each other's sports.
Yeah.
vulnerable.
That's awesome that you came away with it in that way. And when we were kind of building out the pre-production plan for this film, there was a lot of discussion on how do we like roll out the story, or how do we reveal the technicalities of these sports. And there was a lot of exploration of like, you know, when we get to a certain topic, maybe we cut away to like a scientific deep dive on how, you know, the mechanics of this work. And ultimately, I wanted to pull way back and just kind of give the viewer like a fly on the wall experience, just like peek into this world and almost kind of raw and uncut.
Check. Done. You did that. You did a good job of that. That's exactly what I was trying to articulate to you, that I felt.
Cool.
Yeah. Let's take a break. When we come back, we'll finish up talking about the film and just more specifics about your thoughts and how it came to production. We're talking with Charley about his film, Project Pivot. We'll be back in just a moment. We are back talking with Charley Voorhis about his film, Project Pivot. When was the first time, Charley, that you figured out you could make a living as a filmmaker? You've had your company now since 2004. So what was the first big break into thinking I could do this for a living?
Yeah, so from 2004 to 2013, it was always just a side project. It was, you know, something that I always strived to try to make as much money out as I could. But it wasn't until 2013 I had the opportunity to make a video for the Wenatchee Learns project. And then that pretty closely then led to the opportunity to make the We Are Wenatchee campaign. So 2013, 2014 was really kind of the catalyst moment where, you know, I thought, okay, I think I can make this my full-time career. And I was teaching at the tech center at the time. I was teaching the film program, and I bit the bullet and resigned from teaching and just went all in with production. And it's not to say that it was all just, you know, smooth sailing from there, but I've been doing it full-time ever since then.
Yeah. And that's, I think, what I always want viewers to also get from stories like this, is that you start out in one path and you don't necessarily get it all at one time. And there's a lot of forks in the road, and there's a lot of pivoting that one must do to get to where they may not even realize they want it to be. So in this film, Project Pivot, you know, we talked about how you have the athletes try out each other's sports and really get to, you know, the difficulty of it, and to really try to experience it firsthand, each person. My question to you is, when setting out to do this film, keeping your accident in mind and that big pivot you had to make yourself, what about making the film filled in some gaps for you? Because in your narration and sharing your story, there was some unresolved stuff there for you. And how did making this film fill in those gaps?
Yeah, so I'll say, I mean, making this film, I'll selfishly admit, was kind of a cathartic process for me. I knew that there were some things that I wanted to explore. I didn't necessarily know they were going to be part of the film, though. It wasn't until later that I decided to incorporate a little bit more of my story. But for me, I mean, the way I see storytelling, it's the way we interpret the things we've experienced. So we go through hardships and we go through, you know, celebrations and high moments, but it's then what you then make of that, and how that evolves, you know, down the road for you. That is storytelling. That's to me the stuff that's fascinating. And so, you know, at this point in my career, and looking back at my accident and looking back at working through learning these sports and failing at these sports and maybe excelling in some areas, and then owning a small business and learning how to have a business and failing in some areas and excelling in other areas, I started to see a lot of crossover and a lot of like kind of my ability to, I guess, maybe have dual awareness across these different things revealed to me that everything is so similar. Like the learning process is so similar, whether you're learning how to, you know, quilt, or whether you're learning how to rock climb. Like there's just the mental things that are happening in your brain are probably very similar. It's just a different exposure to the world.
Well, and I think that that's true of anything we're doing, right? You talked about it, business, relationships, all of it is failure and getting back up.
Yeah, explore the commonality in just the learning experience. And Even though these three sports are very compelling and, kind of exciting for the world to watch and witness, for me, it was the low-hanging fruit. It was like, these were the three obvious things that I could bring together. And I knew the commonality because I've been through them myself. And fortunately, I had three friends that excelled greatly in those three sports, but also had the sensibility and the vulnerability and kind of just they had to be good characters too, and they had to be characters together. And it was a bit of a gamble, and I had never put the three of them together before, but I knew them through my own walk of life with each of them, and I was willing to take that gamble on.
Well, it paid off. So well done. I appreciate you coming on the show today and then assembling your cast to be on the show for next week's episode. And I just thoroughly enjoyed the film. I was texting my friends last night, particularly my brother and my nephew, and they're coming next weekend. So we're going to have the film and watch it together while they're here. And I just wish you the best with it. Thank you for doing it here in Wenatchee and getting to see the landscape here. And the rain, it never rains here. Poured down rain one of those days, right? People always think it rains all the time in Washington. And right here in our sunny part, it usually does not, but you guys worked around it. So thank you for coming on the show and sharing your story.
Yeah, I appreciate you doing this. Thank you.
Yeah, I wish you the best.
Thanks. As a kid, team sports were a big part of my life. But I was especially drawn to independent action sports, such as skateboarding and snowboarding. I had dreams of one day becoming a professional. But over the years, I suffered many broken bones, dislocations, head injuries, and back injuries. And after a nearly fatal accident when I was 17, my fear took over and sent me in a different direction. I've enlisted the cast of three characters: a skateboarder, a mountain biker, and a rock climber. They'll be dropped into each other's world with very little preparation. I've experienced firsthand that succeeding in a sport is as much a mental game as it is physical. So I teamed up with two therapists, one specializing in sports psychology and the other in body-centered psychotherapy. We were all forced to face our own fears.
There's no way I'm doing that.
Get this.
We looked at people who are athletes and so on to show us a more external version of grit.
Grit is all about, can I pick myself back up?
This is my first time.
All right.
Ever.
Do you want to do it?
Ever.